obvious things like, okay, defending ourselves, protecting ourselves from Russia, restoring and keeping our sovereignty and territorial integrity, and of course, each of us separately as experts. But today we have this collective discussion at this briefing. Will have serious and reputable, not just simply representatives of the civic sector, but the actual experts in constitutional law and international law, of course, practitioners, I would say. Practitioners in international relations. So we have Ms. Hanna Hopko with us. She's the head of ANS network, but her expertise as a parliamentary member, also in Foreign Affairs Committee, and her active participation is important. Why actually we've gathered here. So I'm truly happy that CPLR, Political Legal Reform Center, actually engaged two NGOs statement signature. So Yulia Kirichenko, yes, you actually lead the constitutional block in CPLR. So today we had to really wish to have Igor Kalyushko, but Igor will watch us somewhere remotely, but we have you. It's a wonderful substitution, you as a person who is truly an expert in constitutional domestic law. So RPR, where you are the co-head, reanimation package reform, so it's also an element of civic society. Andriy Mahera, he'll stay with us online in his improvised, I hope not the COVID studio, his home studio. Okay, Andriy, stay healthy and sane. So Andriy is a practitioner, he's also a constitutional expert, and he's used to be a deputy head of CEC in 2007-2018. Took this position before, and what's important for us, he's a lawyer, honored lawyer of Ukraine, by the way, so never forget that, please. And in those times when you actually had to get the honor to become honored. So I do think that this is truly a recognized merit, the actual merit, and not, let's say, not all of the ex-top tier officials are so active when it comes to civic affairs, civil society affairs. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm stepping into the discussion already. Well, you actually know what the reason is. It sounds like, can an international agreement actually be validated by the national referendum? Well, what pushed us to that? The statement given by NGOs and the civic society organizations, CSOs, well, Ms. Hanna will tell us, but it contains very clear ideas that we fully support in UCMC, and some even just took for announcement those legal opinions and political maybe. So what do we talk about now briefly? So what is the context? For multiple times recently, we've heard at ceasefire negotiations. In various interpretations, we hear those words on the possibility of legitimizing the so-called difficult issues, yes, complicated issues, via referendum. Therefore, the will of people shall decide. For the people to decide. And we're not going to talk about the feasibility of certain positions. The negotiations is for the team of negotiators. But what's actually, what's of concern, our partners took this mechanism, like referendum, parliament referendum, as a possible one, as plausible. So in our point of view, and we'll speak of that today, it just doesn't, it simply doesn't comply with the Constitution in the way as it is discussed now, in that format. So in my opinion, when we're trying to explain this legal opinion and interpret that, maybe a broader civic society opinion, as it seems to me, so we give the support to negotiation team not to do some extra work, just to convince some negotiators and mediators, I mean the US, and I will be even so brave to say maybe giving us some advice to presidential lawyers, because, it looks like Ukrainian parties sometimes uses that word, like validating by referendum. So this is a very dangerous thing now, because it gives a chance, it pushes Russia to think, it allows them to think like, okay, that complicated things, we speak about territorial matters first of all, the so-called territorial, that it's easier to give just these occupied territories away and even legitimize it at some point here. And also Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, NPP. And not only that, so I see it as a part of our sovereignty, as a component. Can we actually split it like a cake? Our sovereignty, this is a legal issue. So yeah. So it seems to me that in these conditions, sovereignty is sovereignty, and we cannot trade that, And just to finish with my introduction, we all observed that the key focus of attention is in the Middle East. Yes, the negotiations, ceasefire negotiations, by the way, they plan to start today. The next iteration now, it's suspended, and I think that we'll have serious problem. I think the format will change of these negotiations. And Mr. Vitkov, and Mr. Trump told he is a wonderful negotiator. Well, we can see the result of his brilliant work in the Middle East now. So, well, there is a need to reformat, because engaging Europeans to negotiations and maybe a clear evaluation of the content of the process, and also the possibility of certain decisions to be made by Ukraine. Okay. And I just want to pass the floor to Ms. Hanna Hopko. Obviously, why you will be the first one? Well, because you also supported this idea to organize this short meeting today, and yeah. And you're very consistent with your opinion, and there's a statement from CSO. Please. Thank you so much, Valery. Thank you. And upon the occasion, congrats, my sincerest congrats to the UMC team handling various crisis-related matters and communicating these. Well, we do believe in Ukraine's victory, first of all, of course. We would love to get it faster. We would love you already to become UMC without a crisis, word in that. But I'd also like to express gratitude. Thank you. You agreed so fast after that statement was published in Ukrainian and English. More than 40 signatories, okay? And you agreed for that discussion that we have now. Okay, dear friends, why we actually stepped out with our civic society statement, collective statement, to say that it's completely unacceptable with that pressure put on Ukraine to force us to legitimize any ceasefire via referendum, any negotiations via referendum, and some illegal actions. There's a huge danger, in particular, a huge danger in with these talks, just even the need to approve certain ceasefire agreement via referendum. So, as the former head of Foreign Affairs Committee, we never had this kind of situation for any agreement to be brought with proposals for these to be validated and approved by people, by Ukrainian citizens at the referendum. So, President is responsible. He has some responsibility who's actually signing that, okay? There is Verkhovna Rada, our parliament. And in this context, international agreements, this is in the competence of Verkhovna Rada and any signature. So, and its approval. So when I was thinking what T-shirt to pick for this meeting, because that was about joining Kuban to Ukraine. I don't know. We should have discussed the extension of the territory of Ukraine, but Ms. Yulia will tell more. When we hear something about these peace or ceasefire negotiations, we don't hear anything about restoring territorial integrity and sovereignty, but vice versa. There is a request or even demand to Ukraine to step back, leave those territories that Russia still hasn't conquered, and basically say yes, saying that, okay, temporary occupation of other territories is great. That's what they forced us to do. So in 2024, President introduced the victory strategy, where there were issues about the respect to sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now we are stepping to a level of some negotiations where we observe the pressure put in Ukraine to actually step back, to adapt. And one of those 20 claims actually is the Ukraine sovereignty. And currently, any kind of these illegal, contradictory referenda under pressure of aggressor and some partners, this can actually put the national referendum under doubt. The one we had, when we actually made a historical decision, the Act on Ukraine's Independence Proclamation in 1991. The rest of referenda, this is Russian history, So after the invasion, full-scale invasion of Ukraine and Crimean occupation, remember that kind of referendum proxy thing. So in this context, in our statement, we have very clear requirements to Ukrainian president, and I do agree that even now, absence of these negotiations is a great chance for the president to invite to negotiation team. Nobody trusts them, but he needs to invite the constitutional law experts to actually take this issue from the public agenda, from the public discourse. Any ceasefire agreements at referenda, because this is not in our interest at all. And I'm so sorry, I really feel sorry that we do not have transparency of negotiation process itself. In the 8th convocation of our parliament, we had a very clear demand and requirement. Specifically in the parliament, we introduced Minsk Group, as we call that, a platform where those people who actually took part in tripartite contact group in Minsk and subgroups, political defense, Yevhen Marchuk, Konstantin Yeliseyev, Olga Ivazovska, they actually came to Verkhovna Rada, and MPs were asking questions on the process of negotiation and so on. We had at least the idea on what's happening, which technical tasks, what are they discussing, basically, how Russians are behaving there. So there was certain engagement of the parliament, especially when we talk about possible signing of any ceasefire agreement with its potential ratification of the Verkhovna Rada. So in this context, basically, the requirements for us, based on the our interest to protect national security and rule of law in Ukraine, according to Article 19, all our officials, like president, they have to act according to Constitution. Well, we know and we do hope that this agreement will not be signed, one that will contradict the Constitution and our national legislation, despite the fact that we hear very different info everywhere. We demand to take this from agenda. Any ceasefire agreements at referenda, not to allow the Ukrainian negotiators sign anything that contradicts our constitution and our requirements regarding any referenda. So, and experts will tell that according to Ukrainian constitution, the president is entitled to proclaim referendum only in 2 cases. Okay? And in this context, I don't see a prospect. So the worst thing is that when we talk with international partners, especially last week, when we had so many visitors, in particular, Marta Kos, there was a meeting with Marta Kos where they discussed the accelerated Euro integration, also as a part of the ceasefire agreement, of the peace agreement. And the referendum thing again was mentioned when I said, okay, we have this statement from the CSOs, from expert community, and we gave the text in English, that this is completely unacceptable. You cannot actually launch that simultaneously with presidential election. This is contradictory to Constitution. I've seen that many of our international partners, they have some discrepancy with what they thought that referendum is a very easy thing. You can just launch it in Ukraine, that this is absolutely legitimate. It's according to the law. Why not? So it's a feeling that for someone it's like an excuse that a bad agreement you can dissolve this liability, put this on the shoulders of our people. You can give a very manipulative formulation, put it there. local election in 2020, we had 5 questions. Do you remember that? Yeah, so like exit poll or survey or something, a free economic zone or something was there like that. So certain attempts to force us to that, these were there. So in this context, when Ukrainian people demonstrated huge resilience and readiness to sacrifice, donating and still supporting, always supporting the armed forces, when we demand from our authorities transparency, engaging competent people, engaging parliament, and truly, even when it comes to our European integration track, unfortunately, when European commissioners come, they have separate meeting with president, also with the civic society, and I offered Martakos, I said, okay, why don't you want us to have a joint meeting, okay? The president, Europeans, and Ukrainian expert community, because when currently there is no movement on the way to reform implementation, so it's suspended, it's slowing down, there are no criteria. Using this peace agreement that since January 1st, 2027, that we have to become already a member of the EU without even meeting those 10 requirements. Vice Prime Minister Kachka and Ms. Martakos actually presented that, so specific requirements. So it looks like a certain trap, yes? Like, look, Ukraine is not ready to demonstrate even the readiness to meet fundamental key criteria, justice, rule of law, anti-corruption institutions, and so on. And at the same time, we enhance and grow Euroscepticism. There's a danger. So just to finish, I want to say that our requirement is to stop forcing, pushing partners in society. This is an option, that a bad agreement can be legitimize a pseudo-referendum. This is Russian technology. It's a trap that will put us into more destabilization in the society. This will lead us to that. Aggressor will get the benefit. Instead of discussing the strategy where de-imperialization, Russia's disintegration, killing their economy, harsher sanctions, confiscating Russian assets, special tribunal for war crimes and aggression crimes and genocide. We are being dragged to this talk, and I do hope that the Middle Eastern situation will show that Ukraine is in such a high demand for their innovative technology of modern warfare. And those negotiators who are trying to actually push Ukrainians to that, force us to that, to do that, so that this will not just be discredited, but any dangerous issues for Ukraine will be taken out of agenda completely. Thank you, Ms. Hanna. You gave us some broader context even. And there are many questions, I think. The list is huge, and we will not cover everything today. So just the answer to what you said. Can we actually even talk about it? We need to give the answer. I just wanted to tell that the president, he has his own will. He appoints people to the delegation. There's a certain procedure, but there's also a head of the delegation who appoints experts, okay? Therefore, there's no movement in this case. Maybe I am not aware of something, but finding constitutional experts, not in parliament government, but in the delegation, they must be there, which now would advise the head of delegation at least, give advice on that. And to president, it would be a great thing. Secondly, it more goes for commercial mill-to-mill connection, yes, and economic issues, yes. It was obvious, but some critical components should be there. You say there are no lawyers, but diplomats are not there even, okay? Because Litsa, he came to presidential office now, and he's a diplomat, yes, but there's no MFA at all. And basically, we maybe don't even know, not just even fixing that connection, but it's a question of president to delegation. I fully support you. Now it's time to reformat, I guess, the delegation or to enhance that. But I go back to legal matters. Miss Yulia, why I go to you now? Because what Anna said now, referendum and discussions, and Europeans, when they meet us, they're surprised. I have an explanation for them to be surprised, because this issue is raised by not even a group, by specific constitutional law experts, individuals, or international relations, foreign relations. We can actually count them with fingers of our both hands, okay, with 10 fingers. And one hand out of two is here. Almost all of those fingers are here today, let's say. Yeah. So it's nice. It's nice that you keep focused on that, yes, in your professional focus. Second question. I want to get answers still for that. Tell me, please, our enemies, Russians, they say the Constitution prohibits to give any territories away. Their constitution they say, okay, our constitution tells that Donetsk and Luhansk republics and, let's say, regions, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, ours, forget about it. This is constitution. Why our constitution basically is similar to Russian? The text, we also have a prohibition to give the administrative units away. And can it be verified by referendum? Yulia Kirichenko. Thank you so much, Valery. Yes, I'll start with the congratulations, and I'm saying congratulations to UCMC. Yes, really want to step to UMC without crisis part, but it still have to do that. Ukrainian constitution is better than Russian. You know why? Because it doesn't change when some leader is dictating that. Ms. Hanna spoke of this. Minsk agreements. Back then, they were forcing us to change the constitution. Then we had also, people did not allow that to happen. Once during Yanukovych, our constitution was changed, unfortunately, illegitimately in 2010. Because the Constitutional Court of Ukraine actually abused its powers. Then, some judges of the court were pressed too hard by Yanukovych regime, and this back then was, as we understand, why that happened. This was already influence of Russia, to step into dictatorship, and then via manipulative referendum back then, Russia wanted to do that, to actually kill our independence. Why our constitution is better? After Revolution of Dignity, we restored, reintroduced the previous edition of 2004 now, the current one, and territorial integrity clauses, and also clauses on the regions as parts of Ukrainian Autonomous Republic of Crimea are clearly fixed in Constitution since 1996 and didn't change. They haven't changed. Moreover, with the attempt even to change those clauses, this attempt would not be successful because in Ukraine, this is a unique thing. In Ukraine, Constitutional Court has pre-constitutional control. Before the voting in the parliament for any amendments, Constitutional Court is evaluating, assessing, aren't there any territorial integrity violations? If the court sees that, well, one gives an opinion. It's a unique thing, unique power. This is a binding thing for Parliament, a binding opinion for the Parliament. And these amendments simply will never happen, and then the process stops. We had those cases when Volodymyr Zelensky already was a president, when Constitutional Court said no, and these amendments were not about territorial integrity, but they said that it's contradictory or limiting rights of people, and the whole thing stopped in the parliament. So our constitution is better. It actually is at the level of at the very basic level, actually protects, defends territorial integrity, gives the clear list of regions, separate chapter for Crimea, the whole chapter. No options, no alternatives on the referendum. Well, the key clauses in referendum are present in the Constitution, and these are present in Chapter 3, the so-called protected chapter. And again, we'll have a referendum. This Chapter 3, in fact, regulates the actual democracy, election and referendum. Two key forms of democracy. Yeah. these clauses in our constitution cannot be changed without Ukrainian people. So any amendments to Chapter 3 must be adopted after the parliamentary decision, at least 300 votes of MPs, and then we need to have a referendum. And only afterwards these changes can be there. So this is a protected chapter. And this protected chapter tells us that, yes, in Ukraine, we have national referendum and local referenda. The only thing I'll tell you that now we don't have the law on a local referendum. The law on national one, we do have it, and it's a great thing, because before that we had the pro-Russian Medvedchuk's law on referendum, which was actually introducing very manipulative procedure. And thank God, Constitutional Court canceled that law in full extent. But with the simple majority you can adopt, yes. Now we have this law, and a good law, and it actually is fully democratic. Can it be amended fast? Yes, but this is a threat. Sorry, yeah. But the key clauses are in the Constitution, so any amendments to the law will not give us, for example, a new type of referendum. But in fact, we have, let's say, 4 types of referenda. 1, amendments to Constitution, protected chapter 1, 3, 13. Elections, basic referendum, changing the Constitution these chapters, okay? And if the Parliament adopts the changes to these, one is obliged to bring all these changes to national referendum. If people say yes, only then these changes happen. I'd like to clarify. 300 votes. 2 times 2 votings in Parliament, and then only... Yeah, so this has to be at least 2 sessions, consistent, one by one. At first session, 226 plus simple majority. At next session, like in 5-6 sessions. Why I say this? Because we have very doubtful decisions of the Constitutional Court. At the next session, Parliament should give like at least 300 votes, and then one is obliged to bring that to referendum. If there are changes, possible changes to chapters 1, 3, 13, and only after CEC announces the result and one is positive, then these changes are legitimate. Secondly, the referendum which relates to territorial changes. But any territorial changes, this cannot be about pressure during the war. Yes, theoretically, there may be an agreement, let's say theoretically, hypothetically, not with the war pressure for the territorial change, and then we will have a ratification referendum. When the Parliament ratifies, adopts law on the ratification of certain international agreement, and brings it to referendum again. The agreement cannot be brought to referendum, so Ukrainian constitution says no. We tried. Okay, I tell you as an international law expert, there is a part of international law, not just Ukrainian constitution, which tells us and shows us that we accept those norms which comply with international legislation. So we adopted a law on international agreements of Ukraine. The agreement that is considered by negotiation team does not comply with the procedure. It has, why our two of our ministers, Lavranovich and Hryshchenko, why they ran away? Because they violated that. They signed the improper text, contradictory text. We've had that. Bringing the whole agreement, the whole text referendum. Other laws, domestic laws, hamper that. Those that tell how agreements, international agreements, actually are ratified. I'm a practitioner, that's why I'm saying this. You cannot bring the whole text of the agreement. Even if it's ratified by Parliament, you cannot bring it to referendum. This will be a violation. Then you need to change the law on international agreements of Ukraine. And in the law, we have Part 3 that doesn't allow to put territorial issues there. So the president signed it. Yes, I agree. For the referendum, according to Constitution and the law on national referendum, what we bring? The law on the ratification of international agreement. This is the procedure. And Chapter 3, where it's put, and the law on national referendum on the basis of Constitution. Territorial changes are possible. Final decision on that is possible only. Miss Yulia and I'm adding that for us to actually exercise this, we need to change the law on international agreements of Ukraine. Only then we can do it. The law on international agreements, why it was written that way, with international norms on board. Why there's no procedure in the law of adopting international agreements at referendum. Why it's not put there? Well, because practitioners realized what that meant. And in the parliament, they did that. So for that to actually reach the ratification referendum, you need to change these basic things, not the vice versa. That's what I'm trying to clarify, because what you told now, it's quite contradictory to the statement of CSOs. It's like you give a chance to ratify the agreement at referendum. No. For the referendum, we bring the law on ratification. That's how the law on national referendum tells us. Chapter 3 contains the clause that only Ukrainian people can change territory. President, parliament's decision, they cannot. It's an interesting thing. Yes, it may happen. I didn't study the law on international agreements. We may have collisions between laws. Obviously, we can. We need to check. But you speak about the law on national referendum. It's in the law, not in the Constitution. Now I understand. It's not in the Constitution, but in the law on national referendum, we have an option. Ratifying the agreements. Yeah. For me, I agree that this is something new for me, that in the law, in the new law referendum, we have the ratification of agreements. Now, I don't even understand how this new law fits into others. Okay. The law on ratification of international agreement is brought to referendum. Why this type of referendum is put there? Based on constitutional norms, telling that territorial changes can be only done by people, decided by people. Officials like president or collective parliamentary body, they are not entitled. After it's signed, then ratified in the parliament, and then national referendum, and this is the procedure. In fact, we have another referendum type of it, which is not limited clearly with its subject like the previous, because in this case these referenda may be initiated by authorities. First steps, okay, starting changing constitution. So the third type is the one with the people's initiative. It's not limited with subject. We know that the only source of power basically is these are Ukrainian people, and it may happen with when it comes to these general state matters. It sounds very vague and abstract, but yeah. Initiating this one, who can do that? Only Ukrainian people. Chapter 3 tells that citizens' initiative, even if it's supported at least 3 million people, voters, 18 plus, of age 18 plus, if it's supported by at least 3 million in 2/3 at least of regions or autonomous Republic of Crimea, in 2/3 of these regions, there must be at least 100,000 signatures of voters. This is Constitution and law national referendum. Only one question can be brought then, and this is the general state matter of physical signatures. As of now, the law tells us that we can collect it physically. In transitional provisions, there is a chance to collect digital ones, but still another law we need, which is not adopted, and in fact, CEC does not have the resource to collect these digitally. So as of now, just physical, as we had in 1991, yeah? The signing sheets, and then CEC checks those signatures if these are not forged. Okay, and Ukrainian people actually can bring this general state matter. But I just want to know that we have very clear safeguard against non-constitutional questions. In 2016, Constitution was amended because the non-constitutional matters at referenda, so this was a problem that we spoke of, and our Constitutional Court received a new power. The preliminary examination of questions. Are these, let's say, referendum worth or not? It's a good news. It's some good news, because when we have some citizens' initiative, okay, or 2 previous cases of referenda, but this will go to the initiative. If at least 45 MPs or the president have some doubt if the question is valid, there is a constitutional claim to the Constitutional Court submitted, and all the referendum procedures are stopped, and the court should make a decision. If the court decides that it's an unconstitutional matter or there are some doubts, then this question is not brought to national referendum. So this is like a pre-control. It's so good that we have it when it comes to questions. Yeah, thank you. You've added something for discussion, because basically when we talk about the constitutionality, as we call it, yes, we first talk about constitution, but it seems like the laws, the applicable laws are taken in bulk. So now, for me, it's clear. The opinion is clear. When the president of Ukraine is telling about this opportunity, it means that in this context, as you tell us now, his advisors tell him that, okay, there is like a chance. They don't say that this is very complicated, but they say there is a chance, there's a possibility. Now I understand why it's happening. Now the question, and the discussion that I had with you, should we take all of the scope of Constitution and the laws? For example, I have deep concern that you cannot take one thing out of the cupboard, especially in these conditions. I do respect the law on referendum and the law on international agreements. They are equal in that matter. What's the risk? You can amend both. 226 votes, and that's it. And something may emerge in the law, something new. But I tell you that there's a certain answer for international laws. So these are based on our international obligations as well. Okay, let's not go deeper, because Andriy Mahera, we have Andriy with us. Because now we are at a very deep level of these legal matters. So, Andriy, I have a question to you, basically. It's a complicated one and a simple one. For example, let's put it simple, because legally we can explain many things. If in the agreement we have this opinion that Ukraine, or a provision that Ukraine is just giving away certain districts or administrative units or territories of Ukraine, like of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, for example. I'm not even mentioning the Crimea now. Is this actually possible, my question, from your opinion? Can we legitimize that question Ukraine via any means that we have in the Constitution and laws? So, greetings. I don't know if you hear me well. Well, we do. We actually do. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for organizing this event, and it's really very important. We just have to talk about these things. And it's nice that you've asked reputable colleagues, experts to come, Anna and Yulia, Because truly these matters should be explained by experts, by specialists who have enough expertise and experience and practice, actually, to explain these complicated things in plain language for our audience, to broad audience, to understand. When it comes to the question, okay, like what will happen when such things will emerge in agreement? That the agreement will tell that Ukraine will just leave certain territories and so on. Is it actually possible? Hypothetically, anything can happen. Well, apart from the sun starts moving from west to east, let's say. There are some things like physics that will never be changed. What we observe now, unfortunately, the international law is still being deconstructed. The very structure is in crisis, let's say. But it doesn't mean that it will be destroyed, of course. Because Putin thinks he will actually supersede the international law, but I'm pretty much not sure about that. Okay, similar matters, these matters which are obviously non-constitutional, bringing that referendum, well, these which are absolutely contradictory to international law, to its principles, these have no future. And those people who will initiate that, they understand that there's an article of criminal code with certain expiry date for the liability, and this factor for them is still valid. I'm putting it softly, okay? So if we talk about the national referendum, Yulia Kirichenko gave us a clear explanation on how we actually start that by Verkhovna Rada and President, how it started, and the announcement by President upon the request of at least 3 million people who have right to vote. Well, so I will not stop at this. It's obvious, it's obviously I should also compliment that sometimes people who don't know what the Ukrainian constitution is, they're just cherry picking. They try to explain some articles in a very different way. I've heard it many times from journalists or people calling themselves experts, pseudo-experts. Article 73 of the Constitution, they interpret it like this, that look, we need to interpret it literally in any way, and constitution and territories can be changed, but they forget about other things. Other provisions of Constitution, 157, this chapter. It's important that Yulia mentioned Parliament cannot change Constitution of Ukraine if these changes are about territorial integrity violations. Ukrainian regions, the lists are in the Constitution. We have Crimean AP, Autonomous Republic, Kyiv with a special status, Sevastopol with a special status, and the Constitution of 1978 also contained the list of regions in Ukraine. They maybe had different names, like Crimean RSR and 1994 Autonomous Republic, so the name was different. The Republican subordination city Sevastopol, now it's a special status city Sevastopol, but it's still there. We have this list even in USSR times. It's still there. 157 chapter of Constitution is a very important factor. Article 2 of the Constitution, it says that Ukrainian sovereignty covers all its territory. And Ukrainian territory within the existing limits is inviolable. So it's integral. Article 73 of the Constitution, I doubt that we can interpret it literally. But in the narrow aspect, that Ukrainian territory, under any circumstances, cannot shrink. When it comes to expansion, Important words. Ukrainian territory, under any circumstances, even what Yulia Kyrychenko says, under any procedures, cannot shrink, shall not be shrunk. Okay, let's stay objective. Yulia Kyrychenko does not express her opinion. She quoted the applicable legislation on national referendum, what Ukrainian parliament put there. But the problem is that despite that the law on national referendum truly is much more progressive compared to one we had during Yanukovych time, even in this new progressive law, there are separate aspects and provisions which, in my opinion, do not comply with the Ukrainian constitution. In terms of ratification referendum in particular, why I say this? Because if we take a closer look at our constitution and the parliamentary powers, we will find it there that Parliament, in the form of law, agrees with international agreements binding nature. This is the parliamentary exclusive power. What's interesting, Article 9, if we take a closer look at it, Part 1, it says the applicable international legislations, which are binding, according to Verkhovna Rada, these are the part of our legislation. Chapter 1 of Constitution, the heart of it. The logic of Constitution was about this, that the part of national legislation, what becomes not any agreement, international agreement, only those which Parliament said yes to become binding. What's referendum then is about? If Parliament decides, moreover, one of the recognized principles of international law, obligations of states, it means that state cannot refer to any internal domestic procedures to perform something which is not performed according to national law. If our parliament says that this agreement, yes, it's binding, why do we need to have a referendum per se? What is the constitutionality of that referendum a priori? So then it's a question to our legislators, to those who adopted such provision. It's important to stress on this. Partially, Hanna mentioned that. But I would like to focus on this. Yes, truly, on December 1st, 1991, in Ukraine, we had this national referendum. And yes, we heard in the CSO statement, it was not just very effective and productive, but what was the subject of the referendum? Adopting the Act on Ukrainian Independence. Its proclamation. If we open this act, it's a very small document. Of August 24th, 1991, there's a preamble and 3 pieces. Piece 1 sounds like this. I need a quote. Ukrainian territory is inviolable and integral. So who voted for that? More than 90% of Ukrainian citizens who had a right to vote back in 1991. Who voted for that? From 99% in Ternopil, Ivano-Frankivsk regions, up to 57% of citizens in Crimea and Sevastopol. In every single region of Ukraine, in all of them, everybody voted for that. And our integrity and inviolability of our territory is closed. It's done in 1991. And any attempts to ask someone at a referendum about any territorial changes, especially shrinking the territory, then we'll have a question. Aren't we putting the 1991 results under doubt? Aren't we actually giving the arguments for Russia to say that, oh, but how did you proclaim your independence in 1991? Their propaganda will start saying that we have become independent illegitimately. This is serious. Imagine we have a national referendum. I'm not even touching upon constitutionality and legal aspect. We have a referendum in Kharkiv, Odessa. regions, people support the referendum question. But in Ternopil and Ivano-Frankivsk, Volyn, Lviv, they don't. What shall happen? Well, we have some technical pause because we lost Andriy. Well, just give me a second. We lost you for a second. Now I understand. For me now it's clear, the whole logic. May I clarify, because I was listening and I found the law on referendum. Article 18 of the law on changing the territory. And what Yulia said, Ukrainian referendum on territorial changes, this is a form of citizens or voters' decision-making on adopting the law of Verkhovna Rada on ratifying the international agreement on the changes in Ukrainian territory. So, announcing this referendum, who announces the referendum and launches the procedure? The decree of Verkhovna Rada, with the decree. But when we take the beginning of the law, of the text, which questions are put there, which matters, the subject is the territorial change of Ukraine. And then it says, what cannot be subject? Something that's contradictory to Constitution. Something that contradicts the norms and standards of international law under conventions, which limit constitutional rights. Something that eliminates our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence cannot be put there, and something that is a threat to national security. So Verkhovna Rada cannot ratify agreement where we will have the territorial integrity, like shrinking these changes, or if we refuse from some regions, get rid of them. So now I have a question to you. To Andriy and to Yulia, Verkhovna Rada cannot. It looks like there will be pressure. Those who want to dissolve the liability for bad agreement, contradictory, they can use that. At Verkhovna Rada, violating the Constitution, they can ratify some agreement that will contradict the territorial and violate the territorial integrity, and also bringing the changes to the law. And that's how they will bring it to referendum. So how will it look like? It's a collision feeding the collision. We're not splitting into lawyers and politicians. We're trying to bring everything in one box. Okay, what do we understand now? It's so good that we have this discussion. Andriy, I'm sorry. We'll return to you. We have procedural things, okay? We have a procedure. How actually the procedure is taking place of adoption. Not always these coincide in the laws, not always it's regulated, but it's there. Well, according to all of that, like theoretically, the opportunity to bring the agreement, we speak about the agreement, international agreement to the referendum, it exists, like it's there, hypothetically it's there, with all other rules, as far as I understand now, okay? But it's not put on the law on international agreements. I think internationals will ask us, like, why are we doing something different when we previously got their yes for the, let's say, adoption package? But that is clear for me. What's the question? Very simple. From the moment when international agreement is concluded, since that moment, everybody, as Andriy says, if they don't want to go to prison, they have to act according to Constitution and our laws, okay? When the legal department put its signature in MFA, one takes formal things into account, but when the minister sends, when the Minister of Foreign Affairs sends the agreement for the adoption, the international one, there should be signatures of MOJ, MOF, yes, MFA, okay? If they sign, I know how it happens. If we sign it not according to the law and Constitution, sometimes they say like strategic interest, according to strategic interest, then someday They will be held criminally liable for the state treason. What we can see now when it comes to Kharkiv agreements. Okay. In our history, we already had those moments. Okay. The agreement was made. Yes, the agreement was concluded, which contradicted our legislation back then. Not all laws were changed to actually conclude that agreement. In Kharkiv, ratification in parliament that actually took place with Kharkiv agreement. So we have experience when parliament ratified. I'm not even saying under pressure, but it was there. They were, there wasn't just pressure, but back then, Andriy, they were like throwing some explosive devices, like they were trying to, it happened then. It was a clash. It was a huge clash of those defending the standards and norms, those who were against those, okay? So in Ukrainian history, we have those facts when it was ratified. Completely contradictory things were ratified. Hanna, question to you. Answer to you. So Parliament can do it. The safeguards we heard, Constitutional Court. Within the recent years, the Constitutional Court hasn't presented any decision. Yesterday they did, wonderful. Then I erased those words, okay. Good. Finally, great. At least, Constitutional Court is viable. Okay, one safeguard we have. One that can be used. President doesn't sign before the ratification. If yes, if they take this way, according to the law on international agreements, one should sign. But the president of Ukraine once already violated the law. When the rare earth resources and minerals, when they were talking about that, he didn't sign this interstate agreement that had to be signed by the president, as it says. This is an interstate agreement. So they had some two commercial agreements, some Delaware states, some offshore was there, so they took a detour, let's say. But the basic one that was ratified, it was not the president who signed it, but the prime minister. From my opinion, other can have other ideas, but this is the violation. So, there is a double interpretation already. So president already violated that. We have everything. Even in Ukrainian history, we have like all cases when before the referendum we had violations, and anything can be brought to referendum, any agreement with these violations. Andriy, and nobody will be afraid of criminal liability. There will be no fear. How many corrupted people we have? And how many people already ran from Ukraine, just left Ukraine after doing that? But for criminal law, I place no hopes. It's not about the procedure, but the compliance with constitutional laws. That's the thing. Applicable laws. If we change these laws on a referendum, international agreements, if these are adopted, we cannot change constitution which doesn't allow us to give away the territory, okay? So now I understand we need to split these two. The existing opportunity for these legal ways and the basic thing that we have in the constitution, that Ukraine cannot politically but even legally give away administrative units, like whole territorial units. Do we understand it correctly? Well, similar to Hanna's question, basically, yes, that if the parliament decides to ratify a law on intentional agreement that will violate territorial integrity, this will contradict constitution. This will be non-constitutional decision. Constitutional Court basically has two safeguards. So, pre-control, for the questions, for the subject put for referendum. Because what is the subject of referendum? Not just a question like, do you support the law on ratifications, la la la, but the agreement itself. This is the subject as well. For the referendum, then Constitutional Court will analyze the international agreement. Is one contradictory or not? Then who initiates the procedure in Constitutional Court? Okay, we have the ratification of agreement. Who initiates the procedure in Constitutional Court? Who can bring that claim? At least? No. They have just voted. At least 45, but they don't. They don't do it. The president of Ukraine, he will not because he supports that. So it goes to referendum with territorial issues. Therefore, this agreement, non-constitutional one, can go to referendum if we don't have 45 opposition MPs. If they don't send it to Constitutional Court, we as citizens are not entitled to put this. Because this is not a subject of constitutional complaint. But this is not the last chance to check for the court. What's important here? There is no expiry date. For example, we have post-war election. The next convocation, at any moment, 45 MPs can initiate this procedure, that the agreement is non-constitutional. Then the court does this. No expiry date. But I just want to tell you one thing, as an expert in my area. If the state refuses from the previous agreement, one acts not according to international law, pacta sunt servanda, then we have again doubts. So this is a bad way. So you'd better not actually individually change the conditions. Yes, then this is a violation. From the moment of ratifying of the international agreement, when you cannot change anything, when it cannot be changed, when it's signed, the country takes already obligation to act according to this signed agreement, even if it's not ratified, not agreed in referendum. If our negotiators agree to sign something, if later we start talking about legal things, they already will launch the process. We won't be able to act in opposition to the agreement later. The price of the text, I can see it in future. That from referendum we come back to negotiation. The price of text is exceeding, it's skyrocketing. Andrei, still, you told about some articles. I love your opinion that we cannot just cherry pick the Constitution, cherry pick the articles or chapters. Nobody will actually dig deep before it goes to constitutional courts, the lawyers. So they will do it in a very simplified, superficial manner. So, simple question to you. For example, now in the committees of parliament, they initiated changes. Or even saying, like, let's eliminate this archaic article, giving the list of administrative units because it contains because one of the names of one of the regions, Kirovohradska, yes, they don't like the name. And the second, Dnipropetrovska region, yeah, two regions with improper names, as they say. There were talks like, okay, let's just put this article out of the Constitution. So this article where we have this administrative units, is it important to keep the names? And what's also so important in Constitution, maybe you didn't tell, not to take this as a cupboard, but like at some integral document. Maybe you'll tell us from what we've discussed, these safeguards. Constitutional Court, maybe we missed something. Maybe it can autonomously do something without any claims. It's a non-legal issue, a non-legal question, but what people ask. Speaking of the Constitutional Court, yes, in Constitution we have this safeguard with a special claim from the President or 45 MPs to be submitted by them, initiated by Ukrainian people. It says like the people's initiative, so there is a chance to do it. But we shouldn't forget about one practical thing. I'll remind you that as of now, Constitutional Court of Ukraine functions not with 18 judges, but only 13, so it's not complete. We have 5 vacancies in the Constitutional Court. And the large chamber that must consider that, like referendum, one makes its own decisions with at least 10 judges' votes. Finding 10 judges out of 18 is one thing. 10 out of 13, it's a different story. And just an example, I just want to remind you the thing about interpretation of the Article 4 of Constitution, citizenship. Still, there's no decision for that, like for 3 years on the court or 4 years. Even the longer period of time, what's pending, the Electoral Code of Ukraine, some provisions, and I used to be expert there in the procedure ones. I'm just giving cases when Constitutional Court cannot make a decision for years. So it doesn't tell us if it's constitutional, if it's violating, so it's just pending. Of course, we may have safeguards in the law on referendum that we need to wait for the Constitutional Court decision, but it's not there. On the procedure, stages of referendum, it's very fast. It's limited. And the question is what to do with the referendum date. If the Constitutional Court doesn't make any decisions, then there may be a risk not even that nobody will give a claim, submit a claim like President or 45 MPs. But the court, upon its own initiative, cannot consider that. It doesn't have its own initiative to start the procedure, basically, yeah? When it comes to some constitutional aspects, one needs to get this request or claim. What's going to happen to referendum? If it's constitutional or not, because the court will not evaluate it. Valery, you had another question. I asked you about the article on territorial structure of Ukraine, yes. In some specialized committee, they told that this one should be taken away or changed, but like taken that away. Yes, in our constitution we have a list of regions. 73rd article. Autonomous Republic of Crimea, 24 regions also, and 2 cities with the special status. I'll tell you that the global practice, in global practice, it's not typical for global practice when a unitary state in its constitution would give a list of its administrative units of subnational level, like regions, Жудиці, воєводства, I don't know which units are there, like in Hungary, what they have. Whatever these are called, okay? But there are certain exceptions, like Italy. Its constitution of 1946 contains a list of 21 regions with 5 autonomous. A bad example will be of post-Soviet states. Some of these give the list. Andriy, I understand. It's not about why, but the question is simple. Article, this article, like we're listing right now, what are the administrative units? List of regions is there. When Russian party speaks of including Zaporizhzhia, Kharkiv regions to be included to Russia, it says that these will be a part of Russia. But in Ukraine, these will not be anymore then. That's how Russia tells. Is there a risk that this chapter will be taken away now? They want to do it because they don't like the names of two regions, Kirovograd, Dnipropetrovska. Maybe it will lead to the following. That someone will offer us now this saying, okay, let's just, or unitary state, let's just cancel that. It's a risk if Article 133 is canceled. Some MPs actually offer this. I didn't offer to change that. For unitary states in the world, there is an approach. From the standpoint of current situation, and also we have the full-scale war, this occupier state, aggressor state, is not just it already has occupied some part of our territories, but now it's even trying to annexate these, trying to put incorporate these in their composition, but Article 133 should be there in the Constitution. So we give arguments to Russian party, and these arguments, unfortunately, will play against us. So this Article 133 should be kept. Maybe in future there will be no need for that, when we have no aggression and other circumstances that would actually entail risks. But as of now, it should not be touched at all. Renaming two regions, what's the problem? When the war is over, okay. I think Parliament should do it like this. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is what I wanted to get. I will add. Any constitutional changes should not be an agenda, because during martial law, it's out of question. We cannot change the Constitution. Even initiating any changes to Constitution it shouldn't be there. If we take the comparative constitutional law in almost all constitutions, there is the safeguard, because the world history tells us that during the war, yes, there is violent pressure on the country to change everything, but citizens who defend their own state and democracy with arms, it's not about changing the Constitution in the process. So, not everybody agrees with you. We have reputable people, top-level people, saying that we can have elections even during the war. So, yeah, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this, that during the war he'll step into election, but after the war he may not. So now it's more for political context, not the legal. Different scenarios are designed. Yeah, we claim that again, that you cannot, during martial law, you cannot but if this martial law is introduced only in some administrative units, no. Even if it's a partial one, Constitution says no. Okay, Andrei, election and referendum simultaneously from your experience? Because this agreement will be brought to referendum, and in parallel line we'll have a president election. So Constitution directly does not touch upon this, if election can happen simultaneously, because this is not the subject of a constitutional level. It goes fully to the level of laws. The law on referendum and electoral code, these two acts prohibit the simultaneous procedures for referendum and election. National election, or even the scheduled local election, is prohibited. Of course, someone will say, sorry, but tomorrow we will change these two laws, and we just take the prohibition away. Hypothetically, it's possible when the parliament will change that. Then another question is there. So, don't we understand fully that referendum issue per se, it fully fits in the strategic idea of Russian Federation to erase Ukraine politically from the map? because this is a mechanism that simplifies it for Russia to occupy other parts of us later. With the help of referendum and election, hypothetically during war, when there's still martial law, but some elections and referendums are there, so it actually gives Russia additional argument. I don't know how shall we talk that, okay, in Crimea, Donbas, Zaporizhia, pseudo-election, pseudo-referenda were taking place and mean nothing, but the one referendum that we have in Ukraine during martial law is legitimate. We are breaking our own legs, because we won't be able to reject something that Russia was doing with its pseudo-election. Just one sentence. It's important for international law. One of the principles of international law is the prohibition to use force or threats of force used. UN statute tells us that in Article 52 of Convention of 1969, an international agreement says that international agreement concluded under force, under pressure, or with threats is legally zero, is not legitimate. And we should stress on that, because it's not about Ukraine. So if you can do it with Ukraine, you can do it with any other state of the world. First with acts of aggression, and then this state is forced to a referendum or to parliamentary decisions to be made to reject some territories. So this is extremely important, a global one. But it's not about Ukraine. But of course, yeah. Thank you, Andrei. I think we are coming to the final note with our legal assessment. It's a wonderful thing that we have this article, and we have this article, but somehow many countries agree with our potential territorial trade. It's like US, also, and even China, many countries, Russia, pushing us to get rid of our territories. These countries, we understand, these are large ones, yes, apart from Russia. These are two large, influential countries. But what others do think? I can tell you that we already have cases when this article, nobody even pays attention to it, of this Vienna Convention, international agreement law, like... Just like with the world order, but Russians still do that. They use not only articles, these articles, but they use our domestic legislation, Ukrainian legislation, and their leader Putin is telling us about our legal aspects. So why this conversation is important? Because we have to establish that clearly, because we don't have it clearly. So the final question to Ms. Hanna, please. Only 4 minutes left. Tell me, don't you want to change the text, correct the text of the statement, as we shift focus not to legal aspects, but to aspects of parliamentary liability, presidential liability, negotiators also, liability for the quality of the documents that they are having now there on the table. Well, this is only the first step of the whole campaign, this statement. So when we saw that our authorities don't even reject the idea of election referendum, but we hear that hypothetically it's possible, well, so we need to understand the logic, because not only US and China are ready to pay with our sovereignty to restore business as usual with Russia. We even hear claims from some European politicians who also think about trading our territory just to freeze the conflict. So in this context, we just need to push the idea of the genocide. We need everybody has to recognize this is a genocide against us. We need a special tribunal, raising the bar as high as we can, talking to people. Unfortunately, such discussions as we have now in media center, we don't have these in TV marathon, and taxpayers are actually keeping that marathon alive. Ukrainians cannot understand, because they survive blackouts, missiles, drones. They survive this genocide every day, and they expect that Zelensky's power model, well, they can see that Constitution was before Zelensky. It was adopted before Zelensky. So Zelensky's model, okay, we speak about these aspects based on applicable legislation. So this is the Constitution that we have. Kharkiv agreements. This was the violation of Constitution. What we know now. It was a very non-standard discussion, okay? We had a discussion of experts today. I now have a completely different idea. So first thing we understand. You can change laws in such a way, very fast, 226 votes, that you can actually do that. The referendum even can become possible. The fact is possible. We can bring non-constitutional, illegal things to referendum, and people will get it, to vote. Non-constitutional agreement to dissolve liability. For people to decide, and for people to be held liable for this, actually, for basically giving up. So we have to appeal to politicians then, and to civic society, so that at each stage when international agreement is concluded, when one is signed, ratified, whatever. So for one to be fully compliant with Constitution, but not contradict. But what we have now in the negotiation, so it's a serious contradiction. That's why we have it in the statement, put clearly. We warned the President and Verkhovna Rada. So that certain provisions should not be signed by Ukrainian delegation, those which contradict our constitution. Also obligations on any referendum. Please, thank you for reading. That's what we focus on. We want to prevent that. We tell President that violation of Constitution is violation of your obligation because you swore to us. Constitution cannot be changed during martial law. That's why we initiated the statement, like saying, please, okay, we will introduce it to others also. Yes, it's clear. Yeah, I have to run. Yeah, just 1 minute, 30 seconds. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for clear assessment. Not everybody liked that, but it's a true one. So the conclusion is broader discussion, roundtables, discussions from experts, but how can it be effective? Political, legal, international components should be there. When everything goes together, we have proper conclusions. And what's important, our enemy is not bothering oneself. They just generate the narrative, and during the war, Ukraine should generate its own clear narrative, as you say. And I think that out of what I heard, the word referendum, definitely we should forget about it for some time. We are still now too immature for that. Take it away from the agenda. This is one of our requirements. Take that, eliminate it from agenda. Referendum issue. This is a Russian trap. This is an enemy scenario, and they want to destabilize us internally. It does not enhance us internationally, but itself is. It destroys our. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching and listening. Stay safe. Thank you.